I turned 17 about a week ago, meaning this story happened around 5 years ago on my 12th birthday. My birthday that year was on a Wednesday, but since I had a summer birthday, I didn't have to worry about going to school or anything like that. A few days before my birthday, my grandparents, one of my aunts, and 3 of my cousins went to a campground about 45 minutes to an hour away from where we all live. My grandparents invited my twin and me to stay in their cabin with them, while my aunt and cousins stayed in a cabin a short walking distance away. It's important to note my aunt is a single mother with one source of income. She works at a school not far from where I live. Since she works summers, she offered to drive my twin and me home on our birthday, so we could spend our day with our parents. Since my aunt had to be at work early, my twin and I had to wake up around 6:00 a.m. The layout of my grandparents' cabin is crucial to the story. It was a one-room cabin, and when you walked in, my grandparents' beds were in the top left corner, while my twin's bed and mine were in the top right corner. Before going to sleep, my grandmother lit a candle and left the door unlocked, so my aunt could walk in without waking my grandparents. In the early hours of my birthday, I woke up suddenly for no apparent reason. Judging by the light through the windows, I thought it was about 5:00 a.m., if not earlier. I turned to look at my twin, whose bed was about 2 feet to the right of mine, and a man was sitting on his bed, staring at me dead in the eyes. Still groggy from a deep sleep, I initially thought it was my twin who had gone outside, perhaps to pee or something. Even groggy, I found it weird that my twin would be in boxers when sleeping in the same room as family. Then I noticed my twin still sleeping. Who was this man sitting on my twin's bed? My heart rate began picking up as I realized my grandparents were still sleeping across the room, so this man wasn't my grandfather. I froze for what felt like forever, until the man got up and left without saying a word. On the way home, I mentioned something to my twin about the man, and he said someone was inside the cabin. My grandparents backed me up. My grandmother thought the man might have been drunk and entered the wrong cabin by mistake. A man was camping alone, a cabin or 2 away from us, which she thought could have been him. However, this doesn't make sense to me. The cabins weren't close together. They were at least 50 feet apart. Not to mention my grandparents' vehicles, chairs, dog toys, etc. should have indicated to him that he was at the wrong place. If he wanted to go to the public bathrooms, they were in the complete opposite direction. Why wouldn't he have noticed he was sitting on someone? I've been drunk once, so I might be mistaken, but that explanation doesn't sit right with me at all. This camping trip had another weird instance, but that was more funny than scary. My grandfather had a trailer for firewood or whatnot that he had brought. Since the driveway for our cabin was small, and his SUV, along with my grandmother's car, was taking up most of the space, he put his trailer in my aunt's driveway. My twin, myself, and all of my cousins were in their driveway talking. Across the road was another cabin, and a little girl, maybe 5 or 6, was walking around stark naked and started doing weird dances underneath one of those outdoor faucet things while the water was running. It was funny, but it got kind of weird when the little girl walked across the street, past my twin, my cousins, and me, and got into my grandfather's trailer, started putting rocks in it, and the kid's parents didn't even notice she had walked away. My oldest cousin is a quick thinker, thankfully, and ran for our grandmother, while the rest of us stood there in shock and didn't know what to say. My grandmother told the kid's mom, who grabbed the girl and didn't apologize. This instance still comes up sometimes, and it always makes me laugh. My friend Lily has a cabin on a lake in Washington. One summer, she brought me and her cousin Evan. It had been a great couple of days, and on the last night, we went fishing at the lake, about a 5-minute walk from her cabin. It was about 7:00 p.m., and the fishing was perfect at that hour. To get to the beach, you had to walk through a small section of woods. During the day, it was occupied by women jogging with strollers and kids running to another nearby beach. Our beach was more secluded, and there was no trail to get there. The hill down was steep and slippery, and on the way back, it took climbing on all fours to get to the top. We stayed at that beach until about 8:30, just sitting in the dark, relaxing. It was one of those weird situations where suddenly you look around and you realize it's gotten dark. I told Lily and Evan that we should probably get home. They agreed, and we packed up our gear. This was the latest we had stayed out at the beach, so to my overactive and scary movie-powered imagination, I was a little scared. We calmly and silently, for some reason, walked up the hill. I told them that it was pretty creepy here at night, and then Evan made it 10 times worse. He told us a story about these mountain men who had been around in the 60s. Essentially men who lived in the woods and were part of some sort of cult. He said that they had murdered people all over the area for their cult, and that some were still around. Internally, I was hysterical and terrified, but externally, I told Evan to shut up and stop trying to scare us. As we started to cross the trail, Evan looked to our right for some reason, stopped dead in his tracks, and looked scared. Lily told him to stop being stupid, and the two of us started to climb the steepest part of the hill. Evan grabbed us both by the arm very forcefully and made us look where he was looking. At first, I couldn't see anything, and I just wanted to get home. But then my eyes adjusted, and I saw a large man stumbling toward us pretty slowly. Who knows what his intentions were? But being kids, we freaked out and scrambled up the hill as fast as we could. We all turned around at some point and saw that the dude was running toward us while we climbed. He got pretty close to us until we finally got over the hill and sprinted across the road to the cabin. It sounds fairly innocent, but we all had a deep feeling of dread when we saw him on that trail. I didn't feel like he had good intentions. Once we got to the cabin, we threw our gear on the porch and ran to the front door, only to find it was locked. There was a secret knock that her family had that showed the person at the door was a member of the family or a friend. It was a fairly complicated rhythm, and both Lily and Evan banged on the door with the family knock. I just looked around, trying to see if the creep had followed us, but saw nothing. We were let in, and in a panic, told the adults the whole story. They said it was probably just some guy who we probably made feel bad. We disagreed, but felt safe in the locked cabin with grown-ups. The cabin had a walkout basement, basically like a lower story, not a creepy basement. It had a door and windows where Lily and I slept on bunk beds. We went down to get into pajamas. After about 5 minutes of calming down together, we heard the family knock. I thought it was Evan trying to come in from the stairway door, so I said, "Come in." There was no response. It happened again, but this time we realized it was coming from the window outside. Lily and I turned completely white and stared at each other with that horrible feeling of terror in our stomachs. It happened again, but a little more frantically. We both ran to the stairway door and booked it up to the living room, where Lily's family and Evan were. We told them all what we had heard through panic tears, and Evan went downstairs to listen. He said it was the knock. While Lily's uncle, older brother, and older cousin all gathered flashlights to go look outside, we heard it again, but at the front door. Everyone looked at the door and huddled together. It happened once or twice more, and Lily's uncle finally decided to call the police. He said, "I'm not sure what their intentions are, but someone is trying to get into my cabin." The knocking went on for another 2 minutes or so, and finally, It stopped. 5 minutes after the call, the police showed up with comforting loud pounding and police yelling through the door to make sure. Lily's uncle looked outside a window and saw other police searching around for the creeper. The police never found anyone, but those banging knocks on the door will stick with me forever. A policeman said that it was probably just some guy who was twisted and just wanted to freak some kids out. But what creeped me out the most was the fact that the person had memorized the complicated family knock. All three of us slept on the floor together. When I was about 7 years old, my father bought a few hundred acres in southern Mississippi, about 2 hours west of Mobile, Alabama. He built a small cabin on top of a hill that was in the middle of a large field surrounded by woods. This house was about 5 miles from a paved road. To get to our land, it took nearly 10 minutes of driving down dirt roads from the main highway, which was south of the house. About a quarter mile north of the house, my father built a small lake, more like a pond. It was about as long as a football field, but wider. To get to the lake from the house, you could take Route AA, which was a hard-packed dirt road lined with dogwood tree. It was beautiful in the spring. Route B was about 100 yards east of Dogwood Lane, and we named it Vampire Trail because it was always so gloomy. The trees blocked out the sun, even on the brightest days, and it had a slight decline as you walked toward the lake. This trail was not for vehicles. Thick woods filled the area outside and in between both trails. One morning during the fall, my parents and my little sister had gone to get ice cream and do some shopping, which would take them at least an hour or two. I was 10 years old, so I decided to go fishing while listening to the Bama Old Miss game. The game was the usual Bama win, so I thought I could ease the boredom of a blowout by fishing in the well-stocked lake. I carried my pole, a small radio, and my small ice chest. I had an Airedale Terrier named Bully who never left my side, and it was on this day I realized how awesome he was. Onto the lake we went. Picture a large oval, roughly the size of a football field but larger, with an L-shaped pier in the southeast corner. Vampire Lane opened up to a more severe decline to the shore, and then the small pier. Across the lake, on the west side, there was a narrow tree line that separated the shore from Dogwood Lane. The north side of the lake was the dam, and the south ended in thick and swampy woods. Fortunately for me, about 5 minutes after I threw out my line, and 2 Bama touchdowns later, I got that feeling. It's a feeling I have come to recognize well, and it may have saved my life this day, the feeling of being watched by something dangerous. Bully must have felt it too, because a few seconds later, I could hear him growling low and staring across the lake to the west, to the tree line that separated Dogwood Lane from the lake. I turned my head in that direction, and almost immediately, my eyes lit on what I thought to be a half silhouette of a large man behind a tree. It was too far to make out details, but close enough to be sure of what I was seeing. Almost 5 minutes went by, and right before I scolded myself for an overactive imagination, the half silhouette moved behind a tree slowly. Bully stood and growled louder, and I told him quietly to stop. I turned my head north towards the dam while keeping my eyes and attention rooted to that tree. Over the next 10 minutes, which felt like hours, I watched while this figure moved slowly from tree to tree, always north and always facing me. The saying, "scared stiff," was something I found to be true. For some reason, I thought it was important that whoever or whatever it was did not know I was aware. I finally realized that the figure's path was bringing it closer to the dam, which would make its path to me shorter and easier. My paralysis broke, and I casually put down the fishing pole and started walking toward Vampire Lane. As an adult, I was in the army for 11 years as an MP, but not turning to look over my shoulder during that walk was the hardest thing I have ever done. In my mind's eye, whatever it was screaming across the dam toward me. When I hit the tree line, I broke into a run. As I was running, Bully dashed ahead of me. My anger turned into admiration as he stopped 20 yards ahead and faced north until I passed him. He continued this action the entire run home. My dog was watching my back, just epic. Although I can grasp the awesomeness of this now, at the time, I was so scared that I was sick. Even at such a young age, I knew that a large man watching and trying to creep up on a 10-year-old boy was up to no good. When I reached the cabin, I immediately locked the door and got one of my dad's shotguns, as well as his .38 revolver. I sat at the large front window, my eyes glued to both trail openings and the woods between them. My family returned shortly after, and for some reason, I did not mention what happened. I never felt safe there again. Whenever me and my friends or my little sister wanted to go anywhere other than the area around the cabin, I made sure my parents were with us. What scares me the most, though, is the fact that our closest neighbors were about 2 miles northwest of us, with thick woods in between. As the crow flies, who or what the hell was watching me from the woods that day? Guess I may never know. I sometimes wish I could go back, then as a grown man with military training as I am now. Bully lived a full life and was put to sleep peacefully as a very old but great dog, the best dog I have ever known.